Is Dion Brown, and you are watching Man versus Brand. I want to first say thank you to everyone that is watching this live. This is our first live. Very much appreciative for you guys tuning in with us on this nice Thursday. It is spring. It is Lenten season. It is all the things that really drive us toward being in spaces of contemplation, of the journey of gratitude, of extending ourselves to others. And that brings up a good topic for me, because I'm going to talk to acclaimed author Charles Holley. He wrote a book specifically about healing divides as it relates to race. The book is called Black and White: Healing the Racial Divide. This isn't the only book that he's written, but it's a book for which we will have a conversation about today. So when this episode is recorded and placed into the algorithms, you guys will have that information in the show notes, so you can make sure you check out what Charles Holley does. I want to talk a bit about the way in which we as a society, presently and historically, have joined with groups in order to find ourselves in community, in tribe with one another. And when that thing is impactful, man, we move mountains as a culture, as a society. We drive innovation forward. We drive progress forward. We create amazing things. When we were younger, it was elements like the 7 wonders, right? Like everybody's talking about the 7 wonders. Now we talk about Google, Facebook, YouTube, right? Yeah. They now become the wonders of which we Apple, not gonna forget about you. See you guys. It's an era where so much of the wonderment of what we do as a society relies heavily on this digital connectivity, this digital space. When it's done wrong, we find ourselves in packs, in mobs, pushing forward agendas that don't serve everyone. It serves that particular group that you are affiliated with. Now, back in the day, we had witch hunts. We had mobs chasing down ethnicities. And that's not to say we don't have that now, but I think what's interesting is now we have digital forums and spaces for people to unite under this toxic understanding of community. And so what do we need to do as we contemplate and are meditative and expressing gratitude in this Lenten season about dividing not only the groups that we see that are joined together in creating negative, toxic environments, but how do we heal the divide within us? How do we heal our own prejudices, our own biases, our own negative thoughts about who we are and who others are that we interact with in our life journey? So I'm glad that you guys are here. To everyone listening on the replay and watching this video, thank you guys. Make sure you click like, subscribe, do all that great stuff that you people do. And we're going to start with this episode. Charles, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing wonderful, Dion. I'm just so happy to be here with you today. I think we're going to have one electric conversation tonight.
I'm with it, man. I am fully with it. So let's start with some history about you. Why don't you give some context to how you came to write this book, what your lived experience was, and I will, if you have listened to any of the episodes, interject and interrupt you when I think that there's something to talk about. So go to your story and don't mind me. I'm just going to be listening to the group with the audience, and then when there's a question to ask, I might toss one in there. So shoot.
Absolutely. So how did I get into writing about race? I'm one of those strange, unique characters. I have a very, very unique background. First of all, I was born the 17th child. Yes, I said that correctly. 17th child of my father. That's on my father's side, and 10th child on my mother's side. That's a long story. I won't get into that, but short point is I'm the youngest of 17. and born in the 1960s, right, during the Civil Rights Movement in the South, born here in North Alabama to poor sharecroppers. And we lived in a neighborhood that was mostly segregated. You had blacks in one corner, and you had poor whites in the other segment.
Of the same corner.
Yes,
Got it.
yes. So it was kind of segregated, but kind of desegregated in a way that when we worked in the fields, picking cotton, chopping cotton, doing what sharecroppers do and farmers do, baling hay, we worked together. So it was poor white people and poor black people working together, picking strawberries, whatever. But we all went to our separate houses on different ends of the neighborhood at the end of the day. So I grew up during that time of bombings, Birmingham bombings. You've heard of Birmingham, Alabama being nicknamed Bombingham because there was so much terrorism going on during the Civil Rights Movement. In fact, I was 4 years old when the girls were actually killed. Those young girls were killed. So it was a time for me growing up that I saw a lot of things that no young man should ever see.
Well, pause. So
Yes.
let's talk about that, right? So you brought up this very important historical moment, right? And historical moment in so many ways. Historic in the tragedy of what occurred. Historic in the way that it catalyzed and energized some folks that might have been on the fence about the civil rights movement to really get involved, right? And it became a cautionary tale of what hate unchecked could do, right? Because there's a period where we think hate has to do with adults and, it's you have done this to me, you have wronged me in this way, blah, blah, blah. But once it now bleeds into children, it starts to create a very different understanding about responsibility, culpability, and just how much do you actually have a part to play in the hate when you're so young, right? So you're around during that period. You're young too yourself, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What's your understanding about race during those very pivotal times where it was on fire?
The only thing that I truly understood from that early age, 4 years old, 5 years old, going on 6, was that no white person should ever be trusted.
Got it.
That's the message that I received from my father. My father was a very religious person, deacon in the church, but he had constant battles with white people in the neighborhood. In fact, the white people called him that crazy N-word.
Okay.
He would take a shotgun out and shove it in a white person's face and tell them, "Get out of my yard, or I'll send you to meet Jesus." He was that type of person. And so I learned from him and picked up from him that basically no white person was to be trusted, versus my mother, who was totally opposite of my father, totally opposite. I mean, she was kind, did not want any fight with anybody, but she herself had experienced a very hard childhood growing up during the Great Depression. Okay. And she had also seen what could happen to black people who got too far out of line. So she was terrified of white people. And in fact, when she talked to white people, and I noticed this as a 5-year-old child, whenever my mother talked to white people, she would never look them in the eyes.
Now, here's a question. So let's pause for that, because I think that there is something interesting that happens as it relates to the naming of things, right? Like the way that we name things, right? So we're in an era where brown can extend to those of Native American heritage, those of Pacific Islander heritage, those of Caribbean heritage, and in some circles that's meant to be African American. In other circles, it's meant to be a bit more universal.
Right.
With the color brown, right?
Right.
Use brown, and that can extend to folks from India, folks from Pakistan, those parts of Asia, those parts of the world in which darker skinned people exist.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
the same, I think, goes for white. Right. Like there's a general understanding that that white means Caucasian.
Right.
But there are also people that will group Jewish people in there.
Jewish people. There you go. Yeah.
Specifically those that tend to be from Europe versus those
Right.
that tend to be from Israel, or Sephardic Jews, the darker skin. So
Mm-hmm.
the ones that are sort of white appearing,
Right.
get grouped into white.
Right.
Folks that are from places in Africa that tend to be on the spectrum of being considered,
Right.
and they're not in fact white. So when you're talking about black, when we're talking about white, are you making those differentiations? Are you making those differentiations now in having a memory of those events? Like, can you differentiate what your younger self was seeing, or do you mean white as a specific Caucasian because you're in Alabama and maybe diversity doesn't exist in the same way? Or are you talking white as sort of this understanding of us and them?
When I was young, I saw white as just a skin color only.
Got it.
And at that time, I could even mistake people who were black, but who were light skinned,
Yep.
as being white sometimes.
Got it.
I only knew it back then as a simple color, you know. And so when my mother would talk to people who I saw as white, she would hang her head down.
Yeah.
And whenever they asked her a question, she would say, "Yes, ma'am," or "No, sir," you know. And she would just keep her head down.
Yeah.
She would never look them in the eye. And I thought that was strange as a child, because she would do that, and then 30 minutes later we would go back out into the field where we were picking strawberries or whatever, and she would talk to a black person and she would be looking them directly in the eye.
Got it.
Completely different demeanor. And it dumbfounded me at first as a child until I grew a little bit more and understood her history, because she grew up during a time when you could get beat and maybe even hung for looking a white person directly in the eye. That's how she grew up, and that's where she got that mentality from. But me as a child, I grew up during that era when we had the separate but very unequal. You know, it was, in fact, we didn't even integrate a white school until the early 1970s. You know.
So for someone who has such this history, and I don't even think we've really gotten into your personal history yet,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're still really just talking about you as a child,
Yes.
experiencing race, right?
Yes.
And privilege and access and respectability, right?
Yes.
Like as a child. But I do want to say this, right? Like just coming from someone that had all of that ingrained in them, right? So you're seeing the rituals, you're seeing
Yes.
the performance of deferring to another race,
Yes.
of not looking them in the eye, right? So
Right.
as someone who had experienced that, like, did that mean that you had a longer journey in order to end up as an author who writes a book about healing the racial divide? And I don't want to skip your story. I just want to know, like, that's a long time to have that kind of indoctrinated into you. I don't have a better term for it, but or seeing that and internalizing that, right? So, so was it? Did you find that you had to do a lot of work to get here, or was it, or did you find that your life journey kind of naturally led you to the space where you sort of understood race in the way you do now?
I actually think it helped me to skip past. It kind of fast forwarded me.
Okay.
Because of the things that I had seen, experienced, those things I knew now, I knew them intimately. I knew why people did certain things. And I think those things helped me to really see some things that perhaps some other people may not pick up on.
Got it.
You know. So yeah, so when I was still young, 5 years old or so, when we wanted a hamburger, okay, and my father got paid like once a month or so, and it wasn't very much, but there was a local hamburger store where we were, and when we went down there, we couldn't go in through the front though. We had to go around back, step over the briars, and walk up to a small dirty window and tap on it and say, "Sir, I would like a hamburger, please." And it wasn't far from the dirty window where they kept the garbage can. And the smell, as you can imagine, of rotten food and everything reeked, especially when it was hot in the summertime. And so as a kid, I would be standing there with my parents looking around, observing, and they would be standing there waiting on their hamburger to come because they had to serve everybody else before they served the black people at the window. Okay.
Okay. All right.
So
no, we're not going. We're going to move through this story piece by piece. All right. You're not going to be dropping. You're not going to be dropping this stuff on me and then just skipping over to the next point. That's not what we're going to do here. All right. So, in your opinion, your humble opinion, being 5-year-old Jew till now, what year was it when you were 5? Estimate or
1969.
69. So from 1969 to what point? Because we know that customer service, by and large, didn't change in the civil rights movement, right? We know that we might have that folks might have been able to enter into the front, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they felt wanted and acknowledged and seen. And it's arguable whether it's happening now in certain spaces, right? Where the value of the patron is being communicated. The whole Starbucks, why are you waiting here? We see those things all the time. But in your opinion, from 1969, how many years was it before you sort of felt seen? Like, when was the first time where maybe you felt seen? You may not necessarily give me an estimate. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
In 1969 is the point where you're 5. Was it in college? Were you in your 20s? Were you in your 30s? Were you in your 40s, 50s? Like, at what point did you feel like you consistently started recognizing you were walking spaces and being seen?
I would say probably about when I was in college, probably about around 1983, 1984, after graduating. So I'm, 18 years old. And I think the only reason that I felt that way was because I played sports. And a part of our team, of course, we had blacks and whites. And so we went to these different restaurants and ate.
Yeah.
And then I didn't notice, blacks being last or whatever. I saw people being served and people being cared for in the same way.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so you're 5. You climbed over briars, knocking on dirty windows just for a burger. I don't even like being followed at the Gap. I love you, Gap. I'm not saying you follow me. I'm just saying that sometimes I notice you do a little follow thing. You know that. We see each other. All right, so I don't even like being followed at the Gap without someone actually genuinely and authentically wanting to help me. Don't ask me, do you need help? And then look at me like, I'm trying to pocket something. Ask me that I need help and, and really, really engage with me in a way that makes me want to spend money. So so just giving a little preference, right? Like, I don't even know how to deal with someone being too close to me without understanding their intention. You're actually having to eat or order your food, politely ask for your food, though they're going to expect a transaction. They're going to be paid for that. Right. And you are in a space that doesn't lend itself to eating. Like, no one wants to eat there, but you want a burger for your family. Your dad wants to provide some food for his family, wants to treat them, and has to deal with this strike to his dignity in order for his kids to be a bit happier. So you're having that experience, and what do you feel?
As a kid, my little mind really absorbed everything that I saw around me, and it really affected me deeply because everything that I saw that belonged to people of my complexion was either dilapidated, dirty, filthy, held no type of measure to what I saw my white counterparts, my white brothers and sisters had. And because I saw that, my little mind made a connection between those dirty things, those filthy things, those things that were inferior. And I saw myself as a child as inferior. Yeah. And I basically saw myself as poor black trash. That's what I thought of myself. And it manifested itself. I didn't learn this until later, way later in life, but when I was young, it manifested itself in two ways in my life.
Okay.
The first way was I had extreme lack of self-confidence.
Okay.
And the second thing was I had a severe stuttering problem.
Now, we just talked about you joining a sports team, right? At some point in your life,
Yes.
right?
High
So,
school.
yep. So, um, do you find in a world where we're seeing sports programs being removed, right? Just giving some comparison in terms of time frame, right? Sports programs are being removed. You know, cooking classes, more of like the practical life skill classes are being removed. Music is being removed. Like, did you find a source of support and empowerment and confidence that you may have not had due to having this stammer, due to not feeling confident in yourself, due to your understandings about your own race? Did you find that those programs in school helped you? Did they hinder you? Like, how did that dynamic work for you? Because I know that for a lot of folks, it's a big determiner in how they turned out is really sort of their understanding of some of the non-academic portions of school.
They greatly assisted me. Sports brought me out of my shell. When we integrated an all-white school in the early 1970s, as you can imagine, it wasn't a seamless integration. Okay, there were fights. There weren't all-out brawls, but there were fights. There was, tension. We were being called the N-word, and go back where you came from. Everybody wasn't doing that, but it was enough people who were doing it. And the thing that finally brought our school together was sports.
Yeah.
Because when we showed up, when, the blacks showed up, there's one thing we could do now. We could play some sports.
Yeah. I mean, sports right now I'll let you know that, like, listen, certain segments of sports are dominated and benefit because of diversity, right? Like, it wasn't for diversity in athletes, competition wouldn't be as rigorous as it is. But wait a minute, I have a question. So no one's ever said to me, go back where you come from, because I think I had the fortune to grow up in spaces that didn't really allow for that for different reasons. Like, part of it was like I grew up in a pre-gentrified place when I was younger. Then I got an opportunity to go to boarding school, so I think that became an equalizer of sorts. Like the socioeconomic stuff became an equalizer. Then I got to college, and then I became old enough to punch somebody if they ever said it. People out there, I will punch you if you ever say that to me. Let me go home. Unless I'm at a bar and you're literally telling me go where you came from because you're a little drunk. But I digress to say this, right? Like, I don't know how I'd react to someone saying, go back to where you came from. But I think what's a more interesting question is did you ever really understand the where you came from portion of it when they were saying it to you? Did you know that to be Africa? Did you know that to be, where did you think go back where you came from meant that you were supposed to go to? Because I imagine that early on, there still might be some dissonance between your African American self and your ancestral African self. So did you know when people were throwing those jibes at you and saying those kind of nasty things, did you understand what they were referring to?
No. When I first heard that, I was middle school-ish time frame. And we had been at that school integrated for maybe about 4 years or so. And when someone said that, I immediately thought what they meant was go back to the cotton field, go back to, the place where slaves are supposed to be or black people are supposed to be.
Got it.
That's what I thought it meant.
Did you think that that's what they meant? Or is that what their understanding of the term meant also at that time?
No, I think They were saying it because they were saying basically go back to Africa.
Okay, that's what okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you interpreted it as your context of the black experience with
Right.
cotton field and
Right.
slavery, and
Right.
they had a broader context of it.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. So but it so just so happened that it was sports that finally brought us together. And I don't know if you've ever saw the movie Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington, and how this black group and this white group is struggling, but the thing that brings them together is football. Well, the thing that brought us together was football and basketball.
Yeah.
So we were put into a situation to where we had to work together.
Yeah.
You know, blacks and whites on the same team. Even if we didn't like each other, we had to, at least for that time on that clock, we had to play together.
Yeah.
But once we played together, rode the bus together, ate together, and began to really talk and find out more about each other, hey, we began to actually like each other.
Now,
You
I'm
know.
gonna say this. So I'm gonna do a slight pushback. You know what I'm saying? Like this, because I feel like there's an observation that is starting to become very sort of apparent, especially in books that lend itself towards fiction or sometimes non-fiction retells, or like biopic sort of biographies, autobiographies that deal with race, specifically in film and TV. We'll leave cartoon and comic books out of it because we know that we're trying to catch up. Those are trying to catch up. But in TV and film, do you find that the discussion of race tends to be steeped in the emotional side of it, or sort of this, you don't know me, I don't know you, and so we need to, if we just sat around and talked to each other, we'd find out, as opposed to what we understand racism to really be, which is policies, institutions, spending, job opportunity, like school and zoning practices. Like, do you find that like so much of why people don't really understand racism is, and I'm just going to use this, is because of movies that are similar to Remember the Titans? And I'm not going to use Remember the Titans because I think it's a crazy movie, but that sort of simplified in this emotional way where people are like, oh, the sentiment in the world is that, you know, black or brown or Asian people aren't bad, and therefore racism must be it must be done with, right? As opposed to really understanding that these movies are really representing an emotional side to it, a very specific spectrum of it that most people can understand, but that doesn't actually represent what are the main problems and main discourse around racism.
Right. So I have experienced that people tend to view it as a more emotional type, movie run type. It's like, you know, if you can just get to know me, then you would like me, and we could walk off together with our arms around each other and everything would be fine. Never mind the hospitals and the schools and the neighborhoods and the water and everything else, you know.
Yeah.
So we do have to deal with some things, just like you said, we have to deal with those other things that really drive, that really are the result of racism.
Yeah.
But first, I think that we have to get some more people on our side. And when I say our side, I mean all people who really want everybody to be equal, and who really want everyone to have what they need in their neighborhoods, in their schools, who really want everyone to have a doctor and health care and food to eat and a job. You know, we all have to come together regardless of our colors and make these unjust systems that you just named, right? Because we are the ones who do the voting. We have to put people in power and in places that are going to ensure that we truly do have an environment around us that is just and equal. So we just have to keep working at it.
Yeah, because the real thing is the emotional determiners for having prejudice or racist thoughts versus not really could only extend to the person that you know now.
Right.
That doesn't really change your feelings about people. It doesn't really make room for equity and equality. It just makes room for this elevated person
Right.
who is cool, who is better, who is more relatable. Doesn't necessarily mean that grace, that understanding, that clarity extends to everyone else. And I think
Right.
it's not until you
Yeah.
understand the more institutional parts of the issue that you understand that it's not about whether someone is likable or not.
Right.
It's about
Right.
someone's humanity. Like whether
Right.
you're likable is it doesn't matter. The question I think becomes, do we as people deserve to have access to food, access to hospitals, access to solid education, right? Whether you
Yeah.
like someone or not, whether you agree with the statistics that show that someone will probably do something, that's all the emotional sort of politics around it, right?
Right.
The question
Right.
really just becomes, do you have a clear understanding of the bigger determiners that keep one group of individuals down versus another group?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you can finally break through to someone, like you said, maybe that liking can come into play in a small way.
Okay.
Maybe it can cause someone to think about who they're going to vote for,
Okay.
as opposed to voting for a person that they've been voting for because their family voted for them. You know,
Got it.
you know,
So you're talking about
who
influence.
knows?
So you're
Yeah,
saying one person
influence.
may have an influence on another person
Yes.
that helps them, and that person may not necessarily agree with everything about
Right.
that group of the group of people that person represents, right? But they
Right.
can still maybe influence their thought just by being one human to another human.
Absolutely.
I'll rock with
Absolutely.
that. I'll rock with
Absolutely.
that. No, and I'll take back what I said about Remember the Titans. If that's making y'all vote for other people, y'all go watch Remember the Titans. I imagine it's on Netflix and or like Hulu or something like that. You guys check it out. Emotional racism solving is a thing. I'm with you on that now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We just need to do it on a bigger scale, though. It has to be on a really, really big scale, which is why we have to keep talking about it in a positive way. Because believe it or not, there are lots of white brothers and sisters out there who really want to understand,
Yeah.
but they are afraid. They are afraid. I had one person, and this is a true story, I had one person to request a copy of my book. She was a white lady.
Plug that book one time for the audience.
Black and White, Healing Racial Divide.
There you go.
And it's not popular today for white people to read books on race. If in case you have noticed, it is not popular. And so she quietly requested a copy of my book. Quietly. Can I have a copy of the book? Okay. So she went and read it, and I noticed that online she posted a kind of veiled review.
Okay.
Didn't say it was bad, but what she said was basically saying white people have it bad too. It's not just black people who have it bad. White people are having challenges and all these things too.
Absolutely.
But I noticed she did something which kind of struck me. She took my book off of her review list. Normally, once you review a book within Amazon, people can go on your little page that you have set up, and they can see the list of books that you review. Well, it goes there automatically. So she took it off because I went and looked. She took my book off the list of the books that she had read and reviewed, and that spoke loudly to me because she must have been afraid.
Well, so you said that, and I got two very different ideas. So
Okay.
let's clarify this. What your conclusion is for the audience. So I'm going to give my conclusion of what I thought you were saying. I got two different thoughts of it, and then you let me know what you actually feel like happened. So the first was, I was like, well, she reviewed it. I'm in New York, guys, so if you hear the sirens, I'm in New York. Hopefully they're going to save somebody and not going to get food. All right, so the first thing that I thought was, hey, this review is going to stand but I don't necessarily want people to see that I reviewed the book in the way that I did, because if people see my review, they're going to draw conclusions from what I'm saying, right or wrong, and that may have a negative impact on me as a reviewer. That's the first thing. And the second thing I thought was, well, maybe she just doesn't want to really have this as opposed to review because the topic is so polarizing that maybe I should just stay away from this completely. It has less to do with the review that I wrote and more to do with just maybe this ain't my content. And sometimes, you're in spaces that are not your content. You're like, I don't know. I'm just gonna stay away from it. I do children's books. I wanted to read this, I should review this. I don't really know if this is my content. So did you think it was A or B? A being that it was the review and she was kind of concerned about some of the conclusions that people would draw from her review? Do you think it was B, that she just recognized that this book may not be a good fit for her review system for whatever the reason, or maybe a combination of both, or both are kind of wrong, and here's a different view that you have?
Now that you said that, you really made me think it could be a combination of A and B, both. I drew the conclusion that because she was the wife of a cop,
Yeah.
was that she probably did not want a whole lot of people to know that she read a book about, black and white.
Yeah.
Read a book about race, because like I said, it's not popular today, to be a white person, especially if you are a white conservative or political person like that, to be caught to be reading a book trying to talking about race.
So,
because
wait, hold, pause, because I want to question this. So, do you think that that's true across the board, or do you think that that is maybe age specific? Because and this is right, we are, for lack of a better term, when people talk about equality, when people talk about diversity and inclusion, people call it woke, right? And woke has kind of become this sort of negative connotation about trying to create diversity in a way that doesn't provide value. When woke is actually a term that was derived to say that someone's come to a certain awareness about privilege, status, understanding whether you're on the receiving end of it or if you're on the deserving end of it, right? And so there's a lot of people, I think, that are not black or not a marginalized group that are privileged, that are reading about the privilege that they have to sort of understand a bit more about the experiences in the world. I would maybe, though, argue that in my experience, my very humble experience, some of the younger folks think they know so much about it that they don't have to read up on history and context because they live in like a colorless world. Like, color doesn't exist for me, right? Like, things don't exist in the same way that they did for an older generation. And for them, I'm questioning whether they know it or recognize it. And then for an older generation that believes that lived it, and in a way has a more emotional, guttural response to it because they might have participated in it, might have lived it, might have not known what to do. I think there might be a middle generation that's kind of like a little bit like, I kind of want to be woke. I kind of want to know a little bit more about it. So what's your experience? Do you think it divides into age? Are you seeing differences in maybe how people respond to it in terms of gender? Like, are there spaces of non-marginalized groups that also are into the discourse and conversation around race? Or are we reading it for ourselves to heal our own experiences?
I have found in my 5 or 6 years of really dealing with this issue, talking about it, writing about it, I have found that the majority of people who pretty much don't want anything to do with it are pretty much in the upper age group.
Okay.
High 50s, 60s, 70s. In my experience, is that it's been harder for me to have a really open and honest conversation with most of the people in that group. Not all, but most. And then you have your middle-aged group. 40s, 30s, they're the ones that really do want to know about it.
Yeah.
I'm interested in it. I want to know about it, but I also want to be cautious because, I have my reputation.
Yeah.
I have my group, my clique. I have my, political buddies or whatever,
Yeah.
you know. And then there are the younger, the, 20s, 18s who just want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just want to know,
Yeah.
and they will, turn stones over. They'll ask you questions because they are eager to conversate about it.
So, question, right? So, do you think that it's difficult for people that are experiencing privilege, right? Because as much as I think, okay, so as much as I think it would be simple, as we're discussing it, I'm realizing it may be difficult, and I'm gonna phrase the question for you. Do you believe that it's hard for people to introduce anti-racist notions in their lives if they have and experience a level of privilege that buffers them from having to acknowledge it? Do you think it's difficult for them to have anti-racist conversations like, "Whoa, you just said that," or "Whoa, you just implied that," and call people out? Do you think that like it's difficult for them, and so that's why they may shy away from it?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Once a person has, like you said, privilege of being seated in some of the best places in a restaurant,
yeah,
being served before someone else does, or any situation, clothing store, the privilege of not being followed. Uh, Lots of time, that person who's not being followed, even he is not even aware that you're being followed.
yeah,
All they know is, hey, I'm having a good time.
yeah,
And once you walk up to them and say, hey, psh, psh, hey, that guy's over there has been following me for the last 5 minutes. you know,
No, no, no.
really?
By the way, guys, I'm laughing because the situation is not funny. I think we're both laughing for the same reason. The situation is not funny, but it's absurd the conversations that you have to engage in
Hmm.
when someone has never experienced
Right.
a form of prejudice or racism that
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah.
So you're having a conversation with someone who's never experienced it, and
Yeah.
they're either like, "I have no clue what you're talking about,"
Right.
or their eyes are and mind is blown to this
Hmm.
idea that this thing has been happening that
Yeah.
they never witnessed or
Right.
never experienced in the same way that you have, so that it's commonplace. So I think it's
Right.
funny because I've had those conversations. I
Hmm.
imagine Charles had those conversations. So the conversation is funny. That the incident is not funny. It's serious.
Right.
It's problematic, and it's targeting and policing of people
Right.
by individuals that are not trained to do that. But
Hmm.
it's funny because I think we all have had those moments where we have.
Hmm. Absolutely.
I'm being wrong.
Absolutely.
It's like, no, we're not. And it's like, that person has been walking behind us.
Right.
Like, walking behind me. They're not even walking behind us. They're walking behind me for the last 5 minutes, all right? And the person's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah, it is difficult for some people to recognize it because they're just going about their world. They don't have any issues. They're not being pulled over 3 or 4 times a month. They're just living their lives. But then there are other people who know fully well what's going on, and they could be the very ones who are out there putting it on people. So,
So listen,
yeah.
I want to I want to talk to because first I want to get to well, no. Second, I want to get to some of the strategies, thoughts that you have, ideas that you have that you present in the book, Black and White, Healing the Racial Divide.
Hmm.
I want to talk about that, right? Like I want to spend some time talking about what you discovered in the book. What are you uncovering? What are you discussing? But first, I want to talk about this because it's a conversation that I've been having with folks in my life about um, this understanding of racist notion, right? And it's my experience that so you can harbor as the same race as another person racist ideals. Now, it doesn't make you this idea that black and brown people can't be racist because they're marginalized. I find that black and brown people can be racist
Yeah.
specifically harboring racist ideas amongst one another.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
it's deeper than just colorism or featureism. This
Hmm.
is just like I'm in a store and I'm being followed by someone who is displaying racist sort of policing of me. And that person
Hmm.
may actually look like me, right? And
Hmm.
harbor this
Hmm.
belief system that excludes them from it, but includes me in it, right? And
Hmm.
so, how have you been able to approach sort of racist notions that are held within the same group of people, right? Because it's easy to go black
Right.
and white. It's easy to go black and white, right? That becomes
Right.
obvious slavery, civil rights, segregation, Jim Crow, lynchings. That's clear, apparent history
Yes.
that we can address.
Yes.
This is a bit more nuanced because I can fully appear black, fully have black heritage, and
Hmm.
hold on to anti-black racist notions in my mind.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
not really, and I could be anti-race. I could also have gender notions in my mind. So I could
Hmm.
be anti-racist toward women, but racist towards men as my differing understanding of black men versus black women. So it's not just about race. It's not like this
Right.
broad stroke. It's this idea that I could harbor these feelings and then selectively apply the intersections that I
Hmm.
think it applies. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with understanding of racist notions in people?
We have to go way back, and that's one of the things I do in the book is we have to realize that our history did not begin in 1619. We have to go way back thousands of years before the transatlantic slave period and understand how our ancestors lived and how they interacted with each other way back then. And even way back then, thousands of years pre-transatlantic slave trade, we were fighting each other. There was racism among each other, and some of it was based on clans and tribes, but some of it was based on skin color too. You know, darker blacks against the lighter skin, what we would call blacks. And so there has been a long, 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 long history of us having racism among ourselves, meaning looking down upon each other, whether it is a family or whether it's a skin color or whether it's the size of our lips or the size of our eyes or whatever. you know so sadly that continues today. you know and one of the terms that I talk about in the book as evidence of that is what we used to call high yellow,
Okay.
which is a term that means a lighter skinned black person. But back in the, I'm going to say 1940s, 50s, you know, that was a very, very derogatory term that black people threw at one another. You know, so it's like we do have to face the fact that we have some stuff in us that we have to come to terms with and deal with and clean up and recognize and say, yeah, that I shouldn't be thinking like that. I shouldn't be thinking about my brother or my sister like that. It doesn't matter what shade of skin color you are, you're still a person of color.
Yeah.
And, we are brothers and sisters. But so we until we get to that point and acknowledge that and say we got some issues too we got to deal with, then we can move over and start talking to our white brothers and sisters. But yeah.
I mean, I also, I think that we oftentimes talk about like featureism, like you were mentioning with the nose and eyes, and colorism, which is skin. But like I've also had to do some talks around um our understanding around two ideas that in a specific context support one another, and this idea that of ghetto and then associating ghetto with blackness, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you'll oftentimes see people in one culture calling their part uh, other folks in their culture ghetto, and this isn't
Hmm.
just a black thing or white thing. This is just like a
Right.
everywhere thing. Like people
Yeah.
have this notion of ghetto. So when we are looking at resumes and a Mercedes comes up or a Taycan comes up, right? Like, are we passing over them because we're applying adjectives to their name that has nothing to do with their individual lived experience, right? Like, we don't
Right.
choose our names, right? We don't
Right.
choose our families. We grow into them and we flourish as human beings.
Hmm.
So, just aside from, like, just, are you putting safe food options? Are you putting rec centers to allow for
Right.
things like community to be built? Question is like, are you person of color, non-person of color, whatever? Are you doing something as simple as looking at a name and deciding whether someone is worthy based on their name and the
Yes.
assumptions that go with their name, right? So, like,
Hmm.
I'm a Dion Brown. In some spaces, Dion is, whatever. I look at a name like Charles Holley, right? And and it's questionable how much
Right.
opportunity is given to a name like Charles Holley, which
Hmm.
is very generic in its naming, right? And how
Hmm.
many opportunities would it be given to a Jaquan Holly
Yes.
or a Rufus Holly, right? Where
Yes.
maybe the name in some way starts to identify what a
Hmm.
person might think is a precursor to race.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is quite natural
Yep.
for us to look at a name and draw some things from that name.
Yep.
If someone's last name happens to be Martinez,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
what does that mean?
Yep.
Well, so that's quite natural. Now, it doesn't automatically mean that we can put stumbling blocks in front of them because of their name. We shouldn't do that. We all know that.
Yeah.
And but your question is valid. Does it happen? Yeah, it does happen. I really do believe it happened. And in fact, there are studies that actually shows that it happens. That we have been deeply, deeply rooted. That names and meanings and associations. That's how this country was built.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you have a European name, then like a Charles or a John, then hey,
Yeah. And last
make the
name's a man,
price
right?
okay.
Because that's the
Yeah,
thing. You can't like
yeah.
just all that stuff. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the book. So talk to me. What are some of some strategies, some ways of thinking, some ways of approaching that we can do? And let me say this, guys: make sure you go out and check out the book. The book is award winning, so it's not like it's not like a yang. I just threw this together on Amazon. But this is a book, right? Like, because I think that there is a differentiation in authors. I'm also going to be dropping a book. I hope my book is good. If you don't call me an Amazon guy, but there is a difference. So this is a great book. So talk to us about before we go out and purchase this book. What's some things that we can learn from the book about what it is to heal the racial divide?
Sure. So the first thing I do is I really talk about colors, right, and how we all love colors and how we associate colors with nature and how we love to see all these different colors in nature. But then when it comes to human beings, we have this whole different mindset, right? And so I talk about how can we get to see each other, see people the same way we see nature,
Got it.
right? So one of the things that I talk about is how do we communicate? How do we talk to each other as opposed to talking at each other? So how do we come together and have valuable, constructive conversations about a subject that you and I are really afraid to talk about when we sit and see each other face to face? Okay? And so one of the things that I say, okay, that we should never ever do is to blame each other for the past of our ancestors. All right. So I go back and I talk about.
Pause.
Okay, go
Pause a
ahead.
second. So
Go
blame.
ahead.
So blame is a very particular word. So because some people can say someone can take recognition of privilege and opportunity and call that blame. So if I'm asking you to recognize that you have preference in the world, that you get opportunity in the world, people can say that that's blaming. So how do you differentiate blame versus acknowledgement or recognition of privilege and status and opportunity and preference? How do you differentiate that?
That is an excellent question. You differentiate it by when you say, I recognize that you now have a privilege,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and your privilege is X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
That privilege came about because someone in your past, or some group of people in your past did X, Y, or Z.
Yep. Agreed.
Now, notice what I said. I said you didn't do it,
Yeah.
but you have the privilege.
Yeah.
Can't deny that you have the privilege, but it wasn't you who set it all up.
Yeah.
But you're benefiting from it right now.
Unless you did, I mean, that's a different case because now we're talking about that's not blame, that's accountability.
Right, absolutely. So when you have no evidence that someone directly did something, you know, we need to really be very, very careful about our words, because sometimes we can say, and y'all did this, and y'all white people did this, and that implies that, hey, I did something that, 200 years ago or 100 years ago, my great granddaddy did, and that may not be true.
So to
Okay.
go back, so I want you to go back to your point about not blaming, but I just want to segue into one more thing, guys. I told you I was going to be interrupting. I hope I'm asking questions you guys want to hear. I'm looking at, I'm trying to get to the stuff. So when we talk about an idea around like people sort of saying y'all and saying y'all and saying y'all, do you think that's because so few people that are marginalized, black, brown, what have you, get opportunities to discuss their lived experience with the privileged, with the majority as minorities, whether it comes down to gender, race, sexual orientation, whatever the thing is, right? Like, do you think that people just it's like this sense of release, and so they can't really focus the conversation because they have had such few access to have the conversation that when they do, it's like they're bursting at the seams with so much of an experience that they haven't been able to share and articulate and feel safe to even discuss. So now whoever they're talking to is on the receiving end of years and generations and all that, right? All that catharsis coming out. And so it's less about the person. The y'all is it them. It's just, you're the person who decided to have the conversation with me, so you're going to get all these years of experience. Or do you think that people, in fact, look at a larger race and think that every person is a part of that race? So when they say y'all, they really are talking about y'all.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
As people of color, we are quite naturally a little bit more expressive than some other people, especially in the European culture.
Yeah.
In that culture, it's much more acceptable to be, in control, and when you talk, you express yourself. But when it comes to us, we express ourselves with our body, with our mouth, with our head, and everything else. And when we become passionate about something, and race is something that we are very, very passionate about, it can seem like we are angry.
Got it.
But we're just expressing ourselves, in the natural way that we express ourselves.
And I think you see that oftentimes well, back up for a second. Guys, I think it's really important that when we talk about experiences, we talk about our lived experiences, but then we also have the ability to like make sure that we put it into a broader context, right? Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm saying. I think that is true. I think it's also true of places, of people that derive and or live in places where they are subjugated, right? So when you don't have access to free speech, when you don't have access to free thought, when you don't have access to education systems, when you're robbed of debate, right? When right, I know that I grew up in a don't touch that culture. I've talked about this on the podcast. When I was a kid, everybody told me not to touch it. I think I now realize that the adults were afraid to touch it too because they grew up in a time where like you broke something, you could get killed.
Right.
Like it just the incident never fit the reaction, and so they were trying to protect us the best way that they knew how. By being like, don't touch that, don't speak to those people, don't keep your head down, just be safe, right? And so I think when you grow up with a people that has been marginalized, that have been affected, I think that sort of need to express, need to be heard, need to be seen becomes so important because in their daily lives, they're not seen, they're not heard, they're not respected, they're not valued. So you tend to get really animated because you want to be heard, and you're going to use all of your body, performance, faculties, energy in order to convey how worthy, right? Because all this is about how worthy what you're saying is, right? Like, listen to me, hear me. Like, I'm passionate. I'm talking with my hands because what I'm saying has value. What I'm saying should take up space. And maybe in parts of my life, parts of my lived experience, I don't take up that space of value.
Right.
It's a work.
Right. Absolutely. And I do say in the actual book is that we really need to take note, though, of how we present ourselves. Because there is this notion still out there of the angry black man.
Yep.
That has been used for so many years. And so we really need to be cognizant of how we're expressing ourselves because we don't want to come across as the angry black man. What we want to do is we want to say something in such a way that a person goes, you know what? I really hadn't thought about that.
Now listen, Charles, you had me for a second. Now listen, I don't know about that because if someone's coming into the conversation with notions and expectations, it doesn't matter how polite you are. It doesn't matter how articulate you are. It doesn't matter how much you reduce your excitement level or passion or emotion around the conversation. If they decided that you're angry, they decided that you're angry, right? If they decided that you're problematic, they decided you're problematic. They decided that they're confrontational. They've decided that you're confrontational. And there's nothing you can really do about it, right? Like, it's no convincing to someone who's already made up their mind in that way.
Right.
But they have to change, not you. So is it a matter of kind of like being aware of your audience? Right, so that you're not talking at a person, you're talking to them, understanding that they may not have the same context of closeness to the topic that you have. They may not have the same passion about it because they haven't lived it. Or do you think that is a form of code switching? Like, is that a form of changing how you would naturally speak, naturally deliver this because you don't want to be perceived in a way that makes you problematic? So I'm getting to your answer so far has been it's a little bit of both, and I received a little bit of both. So I'm going to ask you, which one do you think it is?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
By sharing with you something that I say in the book that when we're talking, this is one major mistake that I know most of us make, black and white, when we enter into this conversation.
Okay.
We enter into a conversation expecting to get someone to agree with us.
Ooh, agreed.
And that's 99% of the time that's never gonna happen.
I like that.
Never. That. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm just gonna speak for me. That's one of the reasons why I tend to get so animated and expressive, and because I'm trying to shake a person, I'm trying to say, "Don't you see what I'm saying?" Yes. And I'm expecting somebody to say, "I see it now. I see it now." Yeah. But they're not going to ever say that.
Yeah.
Nine out
Only
of ten
men,
times,
that's up
that's
to
not gonna
them,
ever
not
say
to
that.
you, right? Like
Yeah.
they have to change, not you.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I'm with
And
that.
so when I changed my mentality from I'm trying to make someone see what I see, feel what I feel, experience what I experience, and agree with me and shake their head and say, yeah, everything you just said is right. When I changed my perspective into saying, okay, I want to make sure this person understands,
Yeah.
not that they agree,
Yeah.
but that they understand.
Yeah.
And once you make sure that a person understands, they might not ever agree to your face,
Yeah.
but I guarantee you they will walk off and at least think about it.
Listen, Charles, we're
Yeah.
at the end of the episode. I have three things I need from you to close. First, I ask a question to everyone that's been on Man versus Brand. It's a question I'm very interested in what you have to say because we definitely know that you like Remember the Titans. So I'm going to ask you this: on any streaming platform, podcast, and or book, was something that you recently consumed that you thoroughly enjoyed?
Oh my goodness. Something that I recently consumed that I
Yep.
thoroughly enjoy.
Podcast, book, any streaming platform, something that someone else can have access to if they are interested in it.
I just watched Luther. Luther is a movie starring Bridges, Elbert. I can't say that man.
I got you on the same page. Luther is phenomenal, yeah. So Luther,
I just watched it. I
yeah,
love that. It was awesome. I love that movie, and I love him as an actor as well. He's just a very very talented actor. But I saw that movie. It is really really good.
All right,
Yeah.
so I know this, guys. It's one of the ones I know. So it's on Netflix currently. It's trending as one of its top movies, so you can definitely check it
Yep.
out. I think this might be a series because Luther. So I think it's a like a movie that's broken up into segments, possibly. I'm not quite
Yeah.
sure, but
Yeah.
if you also are interested in old Luther, because I think Luther was out maybe 2014, 2015, check out BBC.com. If you have BBC on any channel, you can check out old episodes of Luther. This is kind of like pre super mega star Idris Elba. So this is where he was really getting the acting in. He's a gritty police detective constable. I think they're called
Yeah.
constables out there. I don't
Yeah.
quite know, but check
Yeah.
it out because it's awesome. So thank you for that
Yeah.
recommendation, Charles.
Hmm.
All right,
Yeah.
second one. So and it cannot be the same movie. All right. By the way, it can't be the same one. So the second question is on any streaming platform, podcast and or book, or experience. I'll move it out to experience. What's something that you thoroughly enjoy that people that know you may not necessarily expect? This doesn't have to be a guilty pleasure. It could be what's something that you really like that folks may not necessarily associate with you.
Really?
It could be like a genre. It could be like a movie. It could be
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a
What is
sport.
something I
It could
thoroughly
be,
love is sports. Now,
yeah.
sports, yeah, yeah. Soccer. I mean, people don't really think of me as a soccer fan,
Got
but
it.
I love soccer.
Yeah,
Watching
you
all
in
of
the
the
FIFA group
competition.
cheering it on.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
it's like I didn't like it, but I just really fell in love with it. I think this year because we made it so far as a
Yeah,
nation,
yeah,
United States, and everything,
yeah.
and I just started watching a whole lot of it, and I really really enjoyed it.
I'm
Yeah,
here for that. I love a little soccer. I played soccer in
yeah.
high school, intramural in college,
Oh,
and
okay.
I did not. It did not stick for me. Like I think I played lacrosse too, and I wrestled. None of those things
Yeah.
stuck. All the things that I didn't play, I now enjoy. Like football, baseball. All the things you thought I would want to play, I did not play. I played everything else, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I loved that I recognized what's happening. I could listen to the commentators and understand what they're talking about. But I realized that I might have played myself into no longer liking it because I don't like. And back then, I think I was like football, I'm cool, basketball, I'm cool, like baseball, I'm cool. I was like, oh, I want to wrestle. I think I like things that were more contact sport related,
Mm,
but it just wasn't football.
okay.
So I ended up
Okay.
playing those sorts of contact sports and realized that as you're talking to me as an adult, I am not as into it as my 17, 18, 19-year-old self was. And that's interesting. It talks about growth, man. I kind of grew out of that
Yeah.
stuff. All right, so talk to me, Charles. What are ways that people can get the book and or get content that you're putting out? So where can folks go to right now if they're like, man, this is a book I want to read? Where should they go to?
My website is speakerholley.com. That's speaker, HOLLEY.com. And everything's on my website, my speaking engagements and whatever. But my books are also on Amazon. So if you want any of them, I have over 6 books out now. They're also on draft to digital. So if you're a fan of Apple and all of that, all those digital versions, it's there as well. So I welcome you to go online, Amazon, draft to digital, go to my website and check it out.
All right, awesome, man. Listen, Charles, thank you so much for being on the episode of the podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel so much more enlightened and informed based on it. And I feel like, what I appreciate most is great conversation about this topic, because I think that folks tend to shy away from it now because everyone wants to be centrist, right? They want to appeal to everyone. They want to appeal to all quadrants of folks, right? And I think that in order to do so, you have to be able to have conversation and dialogue about the barriers that keep the quadrants, right? Why
Absolutely.
are we not a group? Why are we quadrants still? And until I think we discuss it and have conversation and have policy that affects us in a positive way, we are consistently separated. Man, I'm so glad that young 17 child out of Alabama grew up to be a man that writes these type of books, that has these type of conversations, and that was able to join my podcast. Thank you so much, Charles, for being here. I know folks that are going to watch this in a replay on the podcast platforms, in the live, they very much appreciate the talk that we had. I definitely appreciate the conversation. And thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Dion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you, audience. I love you guys, and we'll catch you the next time. Love you.